Hey, how we doing?
Fine.
You excited? You happy? You having a good day?
Yeah, I'm having an amazing day.
Man, I can tell because it just radiates from you. Just one, whether it's just checking in on your live or having an interaction with you, the magic is palpable. But number one, before we start, and this is what we do with anybody that comes on Money Talks, is tell us who you are, what you do, and what you're about.
So I am a marketing and launch strategist. I teach entrepreneurs how to monetize their products and services, leveraging uncloned marketing.
And by that you mean, what does that mean to people who have not heard that before?
So when I talk about being uncloned, I'm talking about distinguishing yourself in the marketplace. It's this whole thing about like everybody do the same thing. So you come to me when you sick and tired of being boring, and you want to be acknowledged in the marketplace, and you want to stand out. Like I'm the girl you come to when you want to stand out.
You're the girl. I love the way you put that because that's as perfect a soundbite as any. You're the girl people come to when they want to stand out.
Yes.
So before we get to how people can get to stand out, whether it's with you or on their own, let's hear your story. We like to get, peel the layers a little bit and get people to talk about who they are, what they do, and what brought them to where they are today. So really quickly, what's your story and what marked the transition, or has it always been like this, that made you become the person that people come to in order to stand out? How did we get here today?
Right. So I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. I live in Atlanta now. So I'm from Memphis. And I grew up really not being told you had to go to college. Like my family was not really strict. They kind of let me be, and I've always been an entrepreneur in my own right. Right. But, as we talk about like getting to like where I am now, I went through a lot of different things. Okay. I started off working as a cashier. I used to sell computers at Best Buy. When I graduated from high school, I started going to like a technical college, but I was following up behind my ex-boyfriend. So that didn't work out. Okay. So after I got through doing that, I got a job at FedEx, did a whole bunch of regular people job. Right. And I was just like, I don't really like working. I hate working for other people. Right. And so I just said, you know what? I need a job that's making a lot of money, right? I was like, oh, I'm going to go and apply and find me a job that makes a whole lot of money, right? So I go on the internet and I apply to be a flight attendant. Mind you, I don't know where the airport is. I don't own a passport. I literally had to Google where the airport was. And it was like, you don't have to have any experience. So when you decide you want to become a flight attendant, you go to this like training room, and they put you in a room and they make you watch crash videos. I know, it's crazy. They make you watch crash videos to make sure you really want to be a flight attendant. So I'm like, man, I don't know if I'm about that crash life, but I went on and finished applying, got the job to be a flight attendant.
So you got it.
Yeah. So doing that job, it was kind of crazy because up until that point, I had never really left Memphis. So this job gave me an opportunity to like travel to different places, meet different people, explore different cultures. But at the same time, I was learning photography. I remember getting into photography and asking this guy in Memphis, like, hey, can you teach me photography? And he straight up told me no. He was like, no, I'm not going to teach you.
Why?
And he just didn't want to teach me. So this was the first time I really wanted to learn something. Yeah. That somebody wasn't. It's kind of like we have this entitlement that if we want to learn something, that we should just reach out to people and they supposed to just tell us all their trade secrets. So this gave me an opportunity to do two things. Number one, I could make a decision on just not want to pursue photography, or I could say if I really want to learn it, let me go figure it out. So I go to the Barnes and Nobles. I get a book by Scott Kelby. He is the only author that wrote a book around photography that was plain words. Because up until this point, I wasn't reading a lot of books. And so when I went to the bookstore, I was looking for books that were easy. Like his book was so simple. It had a picture. Like if you want to create this book, it just had like one paragraph. Turn your camera to this and then you'll be good to go. So from that point, I started taking pictures, and then I morphed into doing graphic design. After I morphed into doing graphic design, I realized that a lot of small businesses weren't staying in business. And I was like, how come I would design somebody's like flyers or websites or do they photo shoot, and like months later, they wouldn't exist anymore. They wouldn't even be a business. So I was just like, this ain't cool, right? And that kind of helped me really think about, okay, well, what are we missing as small business owners? We got the look, we know how to get business cards, we know how to get the website, we know how to do all the things, but like, how do we actually stay in business? So I became really passionate about that. Up until this point, I had like several businesses, juicing business, graphic design business, like you name it, I did it. Had a publishing company, but they all had something in common. I did not know how to market. I would start a business or a hustle.
Yeah.
Start it and then it would crash. Start it, then it would crash. And then
if I could just inject really quickly, what you're mentioning really right there is, and the reason why I want to inject is, that's probably what you see from a lot of clients, because that's what I hear from a lot of people. They seem to start a bunch of ideas and never seem to figure out how to get traction. So before they get the traction, they start something else. So what you're really mentioning is the key thing that can actually allow your idea, instead of jumping from idea to idea like you may want, like if you have romantic partners or something, how do you actually make it work? So yes, so talk about that. So yeah, that would happen for you, and then what will happen next?
So after I would like start a business, end the business, start a business, end the business, I was sick of doing it. I was like, my ideas are dope. It's something else that's not working.
Right.
And the common denominator in all of those businesses, I was only promoting to my friends and family. That was like the common denominator. I could never get beyond my zip code. And then I kind of discovered online marketing. Okay. Where you could take your business online and make funnels and all of this stuff. And I was just like, this is new. This is different. How does this apply to my business? I live in Memphis. Like, I thought you're supposed to build your business local. I wasn't even thinking on a global or worldwide scale, right?
Right.
So up until this point, I'm just like, okay, let me test this online marketing stuff out. And I decided to take my business online after having several failed attempts. And then once I learned marketing, my business started getting traction. Within my first year, I did $100,000 online, which was insane, because how you go from like no money at all to like making money, and it kind of proved my theory. Yeah,
right.
Go ahead.
Well, before we jump into that and that theory, I'm going to hold you to that in a second. But one thing that I mention to people is I put a post out that said you only need $200 something to make a day to make $100K a year, and I think it's really critical, because you say that so. It almost flowed out your mouth so nonchalantly, like so matter of fact. Walk us through, what was it that you did, and what was the product, the service, or whatever that it was that you did, and how were you able to go from 0 to 100,000? Because the initial traction with anything that seems to be the hardest for people, the hardest hurdle to get past. Once you get momentum, it just goes. So what was it that you did from 0 to 100,000? Number one, the product/service, and how did you market it and get it to that and convert those sales?
So when I decided to go online, I realized that I was operating as a company. So I was operating as Nubia Creative Images, NCI Design Group, all of these different brands. But when I decided to brand Audria Richmond, this is, I guess you could say, the starting point for putting Audria Richmond on the map. I was like, you know what? Audria is multifaceted. She has multiple talents. I don't want to create different businesses to showcase my gifts or niche myself. I was like, what is the best way to brand myself without niching down? And that was to build my personal brand, because it's my legacy. I can change my mind. I don't have to be in the same business forever. And I felt like building my personal brand gave me the most flexibility. And so that was kind of one of the first decisions that I made. The second thing, I realized that nobody knows me. Up until this point, the only people who knew me were people in Memphis. So I was like, well, let me go and actually put myself out there. So I ended up creating a 15-minute training. It was called 10 Steps to I think it was called 10 Steps to Launching a Premium Brand. Because only at this point, I didn't know marketing. I only knew branding from being a graphic designer. So I thought
For you, what's the distinction between marketing and branding?
So at the time, my definition of it has changed. But at the time, I thought branding was just about looking pretty. But it was way more to that. But at the time, I was like talking about branding, things like that, right? So I spent a lot of time teaching people that. So that particular training was about that, because when I came online, there were a lot of people with trash branding. Like, I was like, I want to talk about this, right? I want to kind of put my stake in the ground and talk about how important visual branding is. So that's kind of what my initial training was about. That training was about 15 minutes. At the end of that training, I invited people to come and do a call with me. And on those calls, I was doing free call after free call after free call. I didn't know I was doing a lunch, by the way, or a funnel. I just knew I was offering free calls after people would watch the training. So after I did the training, one lady said, "How do I work with you?" And I was like, "Lady, I ain't even thought that far." Up until this point, I'm like, "Lady, I hadn't even thought that far. Like, how can you work with me?" So I was like, I said, "Give me a few days." So I literally, over the weekend, I created 2 packages. I created a $5,000 branding package and a $10,000 branding package. Now, mind you, at the time, I didn't even know that was premium pricing, because a lot of people talk about high ticket coaching and high ticket stuff. And at the time, I'm just like, I'm just gonna charge and see what happens. And when I presented my prices to her, she was like, "Oh, these are good rates. I want to go with this package." And I was blown away. Up until this point, I was doing $75 logos, $1,500 websites. Like, I wasn't really charging a lot back then. But she said that my prices was okay, which kind of took me into this whole nother realm, I guess you can say. And I started to market my products and services and start to sell branding packages. And then I got sick of selling branding packages. I was just like, I'm sick of this. Like, I want to really double down on marketing. And so I spent a lot of time learning funnels and, marketing automation. I really spent a lot of time around automation because I thought it was fascinating that you could set something up once and you can make money over and over and over and over. So that's kind of how I kind of got into the whole marketing automation. But within the first year, the reason I was able to make $100,000 because I didn't have a lot of clients. I was selling very high ticket things. You're talking about $5,000 and $10,000 packages. I wasn't selling $50, $100 courses. I came out the gate charging a premium. And a lot of people say, you shouldn't charge a premium out the gate. You should start low and then go high. But at the time, I was unconventional out the gate without even knowing it. Until I got deeper and deeper into the online marketing space.
There's so many things here, just as an entrepreneur, as an investor. There's so many things. There's quite a few things that I'm just spotting that you're doing, that you did extremely well and extremely right. So from a fundamental strategic level, there's so many things I want to jump into. But number one, out the gate, the whole idea, because a lot of people think, okay, in order to get into the market, you have to price it so people will come to you for price. But the fact that you priced it that way, it automatically, from my vantage point, it automatically establishes you as a certain quality. Would you agree with that statement? Is that what it did to you? Was that your experience as well?
I think a lot of people came to me. There were a lot of people who did similar work, and they would inbox me and say, how are you charging this? I can't get people to pay this, to save my life. And I think your pricing has a lot to do with positioning in the marketplace. I did not want to be the Walmart of branding. I wanted to be the Bentley of branding out the gate. So I operated that way. Even my first day out the gate, if you look at my old presentation, even though some of my pictures look goofy, the presentation was fire. Like, how it looks, the visuals and things like that. And I feel like when you take your brand seriously, people who come to you will take you seriously. People can tell when you're invested in your brand and when you're not invested in your brand. And I think that has a lot to do with whether or not somebody's going to pay you whatever you're asking for.
But that's another thing that I noticed, is because you were able to build your own brand, which is the best case study, really, for other people to see. Okay, if she can do this for herself, she can do this for others. Perfect example. I saw someone who was offering marketing and content marketing and web design services, yet that website was in really bad condition. So what I said to the person, like, how can you expect to sell web design services when your website looks like shit? So that's one thing. So I think that's really number one, and that could, from my vantage point, it would seem like that is what allows you to charge a premium. But then just to double down on the actual numbers to get you to 100,000, how many clients did you actually have in order to get to that number?
I didn't have a lot.
And how long did it take you to get to 100,000?
I didn't have a lot at all. Like, I started with one-on-one clients, so I had about 10 one-on-one clients. And then I did a group coaching program called Building Big Brands, and I was charging $2,000 per person. So, I went from having the $5,000 and $10,000 packages to one-on-one. And then I immediately realized, like, bro, you can't really serve that many people. So let me do a group. And that's kind of what got me into the whole group and being leveraged and stuff like that. But I think what was important to me out the gate was having experience. I did not want to be that janky person out here on the internet saying they know how to do something and you don't have nothing to show for it. So I wanted to make sure that that was established out the gate.
Right. So, okay. So you got to the 100,000. How long did that take you? Did it take you a year?
A year. A year.
11, 13, 12 months, or a year exactly?
Like a year, literally. From April to April, a year.
Fantastic.
And
so
it was crazy because the first 60 days, I made like over $20,000. I thought it was illegal, bro. Like, real talk. I had never, ever made that much money that fast. I was like, you got to think about, like, up until this point, I was broke as hell all the time. And so to literally have this much money, like access to this much cash and like can go places and buy things without having to pop tags and be like, can't get that. To really be able to just live freely, I didn't think I knew what that felt like. Like, that was so foreign to me.
Right. So once you clear that, and again, that I kind of want to jump into a little bit what that did to you, the mental shift about money.
Yes.
So I want to revisit that in a second. But once you got to 100,000, then what was the next step for you? What happened next?
The next step for me was
so
kind of get into how we got into the whole Unclone brand, right? I hit, like, from that year going forward, I did 6 figures consecutively, right? And I hit I guess you could say, a brick wall in my business where everybody would come to me and say, what's the difference between you and you? Like, me and somebody else. And at that point, I realized that people didn't know the difference. And the people didn't know the difference because, like, for instance, people say, well, what's the difference between your course that's $2,000 and this girl course that's $2,000?
Yeah.
And I couldn't answer the question. And so it sent me on this identity, I guess you can say, journey where I was trying to really figure out what made me unique. Like, yeah, I was doing branding. Yeah, I know how to do websites and all of that stuff. But what was unique about Audria? Like, what did Audria have that nobody else could touch?
Right.
And I really had to do some, I guess you can say, internal mental work, because I would get so pissed when somebody would DM me and say, or send me a message, be like, hey, I'm thinking about getting such and such course. What's the difference between you and you? I was like, fuck this, excuse my French. But I was like, I want to be the obvious choice. Like, I don't want you, like, when you see me, whoever you was thinking about and considering prior to me, they're irrelevant instantly. And I had to figure out, like, what was that for me? And so what that was for me was, it was my creativity. The number one thing that jump-started everything, you know, being a publisher, a magazine publisher, being a graphic designer, being a professional photographer, I kind of pretty much took that skill and just threw it up against a wall, not realizing that that was my, I guess you can say, jump off point. And so when I started to infuse more creativity, it became super, like, people knew, okay, this is why you come to Audria. And at that point, I began to start a movement called Unclone Life. I was like, you know what, forget all the templates, forget all of the, follow my path and you're going to be rich blueprints. Like, I wanted to teach people how to live life on their own terms. And when they made their own decision, it made it easy for them to do business with people. And it made them confident about themselves. And I think that the reason we see so many clone brands is because people don't trust themselves. You got so many people thinking that if I follow this person and do exactly what they do and create my Instagram just like them, I'm gonna be rich just like them. And that's BS. And it took me a minute to figure that out. But this was in 2017 when we started the Unclone Life movement. And from there, it just went up, like it popped off instantly, because up until that point, people remembered me. They kind of remembered me, but they didn't know me. It seemed like as soon as I started the Unclone movement, people started to pay attention to me, like really pay attention to me, and start to take me more seriously. I wasn't no longer the other branding girl. I was the guru for being different and standing out and really tapping into creativity when it comes to marketing.
So when you say the whole uncloning thing is essentially just being yourself and not following a blueprint, because people, is that because you feel as though people will relate more so to the individual person and it's not necessarily a template that will do the trick?
I think that the reason, for instance, I have a lot of people in my community that may have an idea, and they'll call like 10 or 15 people and ask them, hey, what do you think? And I feel like that's a dangerous question, because what you're asking for is like what people's background, their history, what they've been through, their limitations, everything that makes them them. You're asking them to give that to you. And I feel like in order to really be yourself, you got to be able to make a decision and not have to validate it. And a lot of people, we've been told to be validated all the time in all of our work. You know, mama, do I do a good job? Daddy, do I do a good job? Husband, wife, am I doing a good job? And we always look outside of ourselves instead of making a decision and moving forward in what we want to do.
Right. One more thing, guys. Pay attention to what's being talked about right now. I'm going to ask you guys another favor. Make sure you share this conversation right now with your friends, everybody, because we got more than 100 people watching us right now, listening to Ms. Richmond doing her thing. So this is incredible. One of the things I also want to talk about when you do say that whole validation aspect, because there's so many people. There's a perfect example. There's a guy who's on here right now. He sent me a song. He said he's gonna know, but he sent me a song. He said, I just helped produce this song. What do you think? I took a look at it and I saw all the comments. It was very apparent to me that it was mostly friends. Because they say, oh, this is great. This is great. Then I asked them, do you want my honest opinion? Because what is the goal here? Do you want to win Grammys and do you want to be in the Billboard? Or is it just a hobby thing? And he goes, well, we want to win Grammys. I said, all right, then you got to benchmark yourself against Drake, against the best.
Right.
And then you're not going to, and if we're being honest with ourselves right now, Drake wouldn't release that. And that was different. You know, that's that validation. A lot of people, that's just an example. Another example was a website that I saw someone put together. And all the friends said it was good. It was horrible. It was absolutely atrocious. So that whole validation, people seek that. Yes, oh, good job. But that's not necessarily what's required to succeed. What is your take on that? Or how do you go about it when people come to you? Are you harsh? Do you tell them, nah, it's not good? Do you pass
So I tell people out the gate, I'm direct as hell.
Yes.
Don't come to me if you want me to be soft. And I think, you know, I've gotten a lot of unfollows for being direct. And
so what?
I'm one of those people where I'm like, I'd rather see you win and just instead of selling you BS.
Right.
And so a lot of the times when people come to me, I don't even really ask for permission to tell people the truth. It's kind of like if you come in my space and you ask me for my opinion, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to put a little blanket on top of it. I'm going to tell you straight up what it is. And it's not me being mean. It's not me being cruel or anything. But I also give my clients the option to take what I say, but not necessarily apply everything that I say, because I'm not always right. When we think about the whole essence of being uncloned, it's about trusting yourself.
Right.
You wouldn't have to ask me if you trust yourself.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? So
yeah,
I know when people ask me for their opinion, there's still a lot of things that have to be dealt with, right? Like, okay, it's a reason why you asked me. Or it's another thing that I absolutely hate. People say all the time, hey, Audria, you killing it. I want to be just like you. I hate that. Some people love it. Like, ooh, people like to be admired in that way.
Right.
I don't like it because it implies that I have something that you can't have. And that's not necessarily true, right? Like, if you admire me, that's fine. But you got to find what makes you so dope. That way you won't have to anchor me to you, if that makes sense. Like, I want you to be able to be dope in your own right without having to think that you have to have my accolades or my branding or my website or my marketing efforts in order to be successful. So I really do a lot of mindset work way before we even get to marketing.
But that's just really so interesting because, again, one thing I've seen, so I don't know if you're aware, but my whole Instagram, it was just my friends that was on there. Then around 6 weeks ago, I started making videos, and then it grew to 30-something thousand.
Oh wow!
It just in the past 6 weeks, and what it is just me just trying shit. And then I have a basic template that I know is efficient, that I know I can be consistent with every day. Then I see other people basically taking my as if it's a template. It's just me that like trying shit, you know, and that works for my personality, you know.
Right.
And then people take that, and I'm like, it's not about the system. It's about you.
Exactly.
So one thing, and that leads me to my question is, let's say I come to you from 8 weeks ago, or somebody comes to you ground zero. What is your process like? What do you say you work mindset? What is that process like? How do you start, and how do you move them along to where they can stand out?
So the first thing I do, especially like when I do strategy days with clients, the first thing people come to me is like they come with a list of who they want to be like. that like most people come with a list of, oh, I want to do what this person is doing, or I want to do what that person is doing. Yeah. So immediately I scratched the list. I was like, you know what? Thanks for bringing some references, but let's just take that and put that to the side. And so I asked them straight up, what would you create if you weren't anchoring yourself to anyone? If you wasn't checking for anyone, what would be the things that you would create? What, you know, what's missing in the marketplace? What do you feel like if you created, people would give you some shit about, right? And then we began to start creating things that's been in their journals, or we start to create things that people told them that they couldn't do, or the things that they think that they're incapable of doing. And then we work from there to actually bring that idea into preparation, then we implement, and then we launch. But the initial phase is really just showing people that there's no idea that's crazy until we put it in the marketplace and we get a response. And I think that's so important because we don't want to be wrong. We want to be perfect. And I tell people all the time, when people ask me like, hey, do you think it's going to do good? I don't know. Let's put it out. The market going to tell you if it's going to do good. If you don't make no damn sales when you post it, there go your answer. Like, we can sit here all day and strategize till the moon come up. Right. But at the end of the day, the market is going to tell you whether or not your product or service is in demand.
And that is that's an exemplification of what you said exactly. We said, okay, I have something here. People said, are you selling? It's like, I don't know. I guess I'll figure it out. Well, right. Come up with all these sorts of plans. And then, which is putting the cart before the horse, really, because if the market, like you said, will tell you if there's a need or if there's a demand for it.
Right.
Exactly. So what is one of the, so you start there, then what sort of goes next? And how long is that process from the time that it comes to you? Like, look, I got this. Let's say it's a book, for instance. And I have a book I want to start, or I have a book idea. What do you then say and what do you do? And how long does it take until it comes to fruition and gets thrown out there?
But before we even talk about getting a book, I want to know what's your authority and credibility first.
Good. Yes.
So a lot of people want to prematurely write books because they see people doing it, and it's actually very easy to publish a book.
Yes.
And so because of the ease and it's so easy to get into the market, I think a lot of people just be like, oh, I'm just gonna put together. And people always, talk shit online, like, oh, you sold me a pamphlet, and they're so pissed because they get the book and it's like 50 pages. Like, this ain't no damn book. But at the same time, I always want to know, like, what's your authority and credibility? And number two, what is the goal of the book? Like, your book has to be a goal. You can't, even if you're gonna tell your story, what's the point in telling your story? Why should I care about your story? Why should I listen? Why should I listen to your story? And then another thing that I take into consideration before we actually publish the book is, how do you actually plan to leverage it? Do you plan to get more speaking opportunities? Are you trying to get more coaching and consulting gigs? Are you trying to establish thought leadership in a particular market or segment? There's a lot. For me, I kind of like look at how we turn this book into a business model. And then from there, we begin to build out those spokes and then begin to launch.
And how long does that process typically take?
It depends on the person.
It can sound intensive. It can sound like something you can do in a few days or a week or even a month.
I mean, like, for instance, I've been working on my new book, Unclone Marketing, since September to now. So it haven't even been a year. We're already in launch mode. We've already sold over 350 copies. Does that make sense? So I'm an executor. That's why I said it depends on the person, because, I can say, like, you can really legit get a book out in 90 days, like a real solid book. But most people be in their head overthinking, again, got to go validate with 1,000 people. And I think that if you learn how to get out your head and execute fast, you can do anything real fast. Like, to me, people ask me all the time, how do you produce so much? Like, you're always producing. How are you able to do this and do this and do this? I'm not in my head. If people would get out of their head and into execution, they'd be all right.
Interesting. One thing you mentioned about the whole book, and this is a true story, from my personal standpoint, it took me about 10 years to do my book, which was getting out of my own head. But once I actually decided to do it, it took me about 30 days. I put it up for pre-order. Then it took me 3 days to write. And when I put it for pre-order, it actually hit #1. So I'm like, okay, I have to write this. So I went out and wrote it and it took me three days to do. But it took me 10 years to get out of my own way.
Right.
So it's so true. I can so relate to what you're saying there. So, all right. So that's with a book. Is your process the same, whether it's a book or it's a
It's the same process. It's the same process. Whether you want to launch a course, a class, a speaking tour, a boot camp, a virtual conference, a podcast, an IG live show, whatever it is that you want to do, you literally have to, I go through those processes every single time.
What one of the from a product standpoint or a service standpoint, what are some of the let's call them products, the things that people have for sale, whether it's themselves as a service or if it's something they created or a book or a course, whatever, what have you. What do you think has the highest probability of success? I know it's very it's a simplistic question, but what have you seen statistically has the highest probability of success in terms of things that people can put to market with very little money, and if they're starting from scratch trying to find an idea? I know it comes
digital
from
products,
but just based on what you've seen.
Digital products. You
digital
can
products,
literally have a digital product idea and then tomorrow make money. You could make it tonight and sell it tomorrow.
Give us an example.
Like I put together some Canva templates that I designed in Canva. I made them in Canva. The next day I sold like over a ridiculous amount. Like
wait. You created a template? What did you?
Yeah, a Canva template. Like some templates that you use for social media.
Oh, you created a presentation that people could use as a template on Canva?
No, template. So like social media posts. So you put your video, you can change out the color, you can change out your name. And these are social media templates that I made and I sold online. But if you're not a designer, right? Another thing you can sell is a checklist. Audio training, micro training, where you record a how-to video, one video, and sell it for like $10, $15. Something you probably would have put on YouTube, but because of how you package it and presented it, you can actually sell it. So
where do you sell it? When you said you can sell it, where do people sell it? Because it's like some people will go, naturally, the objection will creep in and go, I don't have a website, or I don't have any followers, or I don't have any Facebook friends. Where can they sell it?
They got to build an audience. Let's be real.
Okay, so it goes back to building an audience, and that's what allows you to create a pipeline. So how do people do that? How do they build an audience? And if they come to you, how do you recommend people build an audience? Basically, using your own strategy for yourself.
So for me personally, out the gate, I started with advertising. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but you have to keep in mind that out the gate, I kept running into the same thing, the same zip code within Memphis. And so I deliberately went into advertising mode. Another thing I did, I invested in some different programs so I could be in different Facebook groups where people who were already invested. So those people became my initial clients as well. I also joined a lot of different Facebook groups where, you know how you go on Facebook and it'll tell you how many mutual friends in this group. I was looking for groups that didn't have mutual friends because that showed me, that was an indication that I was a lot of degrees outside of my network. And
very good.
An opportunity to be able to actually market and talk about what it is that I have. But that was kind of how I got going. And it wasn't until later on down the road that I started getting interviews and, doing all of those things. But before people want to interview you, they want to know you dope. Don't nobody want to interview some whack folks. They just don't. They don't got the time. They don't have the energy or the mental space. So you definitely want to make sure that you own it popping. And the way you do that is by establishing your authority and credibility. That means creating content, letting people know that you actually have that skill set, demonstrating what it is that you know, posting on a consistent basis. These things are very simple, yet people don't do it.
Right. And it all goes back to the whole discipline thing. So, but you're saying that you got to have the authority and establish the credibility. When was the first time you actually got interviewed, and how did it come about? And I know some people out there thinking how they may be able to get interviewed. So how did that work for you?
My very first interview was a young lady from a paid program that I was in who seen me talking about my wins on Facebook. I was sharing a post about how much money I made, and she was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. Would you come on my podcast? And I'm like, yeah. I just said yeah to every opportunity. Now I'm being a little bit more picky because I have more opportunities and I do time. But at that time, I was like, hell yeah to everything. I didn't care if the audience was one person or 500 people. I was like, yep. And that allowed me to really establish myself really quick, because also another way, when you build your authority and credibility, when you get interviewed, that's instant authority and credibility, because that means that you are important enough for people to want to know more about you, right? So, yeah.
So, and what was the first big hit, as we call it, the first big interview that you did where you got to speak about what it is that you do and people really got to see who you are and what you're about on a larger scale than just from when it was none of it?
Yeah, so it was last year.
Okay.
I run a membership called Unclone Marketing. It's not open anymore. I retired it, but at the time, one of the biggest membership gurus, which is Stu McLaren, he has a huge community. He's kind of like the GOAT of members. And I ended up joining his program, and it gave me an opportunity to be exposed to another community. Going back to what I said, I invested in the group, and it gave him an opportunity to see me. And then last year I got interviewed on a podcast. They interviewed me for a backstage pass, which is kind of like one of the most elite invites, because you get to get interviewed by him, and they also kind of go behind the scenes and see what you've done. So basically, they interviewed me because I did this really dope virtual conference called UncloneCon, and they were so blown away by my strategy on how I enrolled people into the membership. And they was like, "Who is this girl?" And I think that was the first time that I had got the most diversity as far as people being able to see me on a global scale, because up until this point, I was pretty known in the African American community, but to be able to kind of have that diversity in other platforms really, I guess you could say, expanded my brand.